America is well aware of the work of the Medical Mission Sisters and are very proud of this group of trained women who are bringing the gospel to India by means of medicine. Dominicans, to whom the missions are always dear, rejoice in their progress in this new and very modern apostolate. But few Dominicans are aware that the woman who first dreamed of this unique answer to a desperate problem was a Dominican tertiary. Welcome back to the Catholic Northman. Once again, I am drawing from the book St. Dominic's Family. And you may have heard of Dr. Agnes MacLaren before. She's well known in feminist circles because she was one of the very first women doctors to graduate. Before I get into this a little bit further, I want to give a shout out to Seller559. Go over and check his channel out. I really dig this guy's work. He's not Catholic, but I find very rare circumstances where I ever disagree with anything he has to say. This man has a gift of clarity, and he has a gift of being able to speak without saying like I do all the time. And he's got his head screwed on straight. Go check him out. First of all, what's a Dominican tertiary? Well, a tertiary would be a lay person who is associated with the Dominican order. And a lay person is someone who is just you or I in the pews, married, single, whatever. But she didn't start out that way. She started out as a Presbyterian, was raised Presbyterian in Scotland. She was born in 1837. Her father, a wealthy and politically active man, brought into their big, hospitable home all the thinkers and doers of that time of great social ferment. His friends were idealists, and they wished to alleviate the conditions that then prevailed in shops and factories. Agnes, little more than a baby, sat and absorbed the ideals of social justice that were discussed frankly at her father's table. Now, I just want to address social justice for a minute, because in today's world, when we think of social justice, we think of LGBTQ, and we think of homosexual marriage, and we think of all of these things that are not really liberating. They're not real social justice. Real social justice is something that should be second nature to a true Christian. Things like feeding the poor, giving aid to the sick, performing acts of charity for your fellow man. Those are secondary and things that should be second nature to you as a Christian. That's real social justice. And as long as Christianity has been around, I think people have struggled with real social justice. As soon as she was old enough, she joined the discussions herself. It was a set of circumstances unusual for a young lady of the 19th century, and it was to shape her whole life and work. The MacLarens were Presbyterians, solidly Christian people who took the gospel seriously and thought of sensible ways to apply it. Agnes and her large family of brothers and sisters learned early from their father the power of legislation and the necessity of political consciousness, and from their kindly stepmother the practical and personal aspects of charity. In maturity, Agnes was to realize they had taught her well to deal with injustice and poverty, both in the abstract and in the concrete. Again, there's something of note. Today, everything's in the abstract. There is no concrete. Everything is placed in the abstract. There was a notion at one time of something being abstract and something being concrete being two separate things, something that can be proved and something that is a theory. But broad-minded though they were, they balked when at the age of 27 she told them that she wanted to study to be a doctor. Not only did nice girls not study such things, but it was a fact that no university would accept a woman as a candidate for medical college. Agnes was not her father's daughter for nothing. She set out to batter down the walls. She lectured and campaigned and talked to officials and ignored the jeers and the cold contempt that met her ideas. Several of her friends who had succeeded in getting into the University of Edinburgh were being booed and annoyed by the men students. Agnes joined with them in public debate on the touchy question, studying long hours to make her arguments as telling as possible. At length, failing to make any impression on the universities of the British Isles, she went to France with a letter from Cardinal Manning. Agnes knew that the great English convert cardinal was interested in the social reforms that so intrigued her, but she had never met anyone quite like the French prelate, whom she presented her letter. It was her first conscious contact with the Catholic Church, and she was deeply impressed. Through the help of this churchman, she was enrolled in the University of Montpellier, and after a long and grueling course of studies during which she nearly worked herself to death, she emerged with her medical degree, and she had something else, a deep love and respect for the Hospital Sisters of St. Francis, with whom she had made her home as a student. The splendid example of these good women was to bear young Dr. MacLaren through many trials. Never obtrusive, never scandalized, never critical, always cheerful, they cared for the lady doctor and gave her happy memories of the church. But it was to be 20 years before the independent Scots doctor would seek baptism. Nothing ever came easy to Agnes MacLaren. At the age of 41, Dr. MacLaren began practicing medicine. She loved her work and she gave every ounce of energy to it. She felt no spiritual lack that she could define. But once in passing through Lyons, she talked with a Catholic priest. No, she did not want to be a Catholic. She was too independent. She did not want to surrender one jot of that independence to an authoritarian church. Nevertheless, she wrote to the priest and asked him if he would give her a retreat. She made it, an excellent retreat, she said, and emerged as staunchly Protestant as ever. And each year, for nearly 20 years, she returned to the same priest for a week of retreat, which never seemed to dent her Protestantism. Then, one day, the gift of faith came to this hard-working and zealous woman, whom her friends considered a saint, and Agnes MacLaren was received into the Catholic Church. She would like to have joined the sisters and remained there forever, but she was 61 years old and very independent. It would be difficult at that age to fit herself into a totally different way of life. There was nothing, however, to prevent her from joining the Third Order of St. Dominic. In this excellent group, she would be able to pursue her own work with the added impetus of prayer and sisterhood. She was received into the order with a great sense of having reached, at last, a definite goal. Because she felt that it was time to begin planning for her old age, Agnes purchased a comfortable home and spent a good deal of time and thought in furnishing a chapel in it. Her plan for getting a chaplain was simplicity itself. She would search out priests who were tired or ill, or at any rate in need of a rest, and give them the freedom of the whole lovely seaside home, in return for which they would say Mass in her chapel. The plan was well received by bishops and priests alike. Soon she had a steady stream of applicants for this unique form of clerical vacation. It was one of her visiting priests who opened her eyes to the last and greatest work of her life. He was from India, and his tales of the missions there were enthralling. It made her blood boil to hear of the injustice, the poverty, and the hunger. She was always a campaigner for social justice. So once again, true social justice. But the good priest told her that the key to the whole question of the conversion of India was a trained corps of women doctors, preferably religious, who would reach the women and the children of this land now shut off by prejudice from ordinary medical and sanitary care. And by that, what is meant, I had to do a little bit of digging to find this out. So at the time in India, when this was in northern India too, which is now Pakistan, women could not be seen by any men other than family members. So that meant if a woman was ill, if she was in childbirth, anything that required a doctor, it had to be a female doctor, or it was nothing. And because of this, many women and children died in childbirth and in things that could have been simply cured with the medical technology that they had at the time. Agnes was astounded and deeply moved. If she had been 20 years younger, there would be no question at all about what she should do. She would go herself and build a hospital staffed by women and open the gates of bodily and spiritual health to the women of India. But at 61, with failing health, one did not go trekking off halfway across the world. Still, there was one thing she could do about it. She could interest others in building and staffing a hospital. The remainder of her life was to be spent in this effort, and it took every ounce of her strength and every bit of her ability. Only when she was virtually on her deathbed, at the age of 76, was she able to see a glimmer of hope. A young Austrian girl, Anna Dengel, a girl with a great heart and a vision of medical help in the far missions, wrote to her to ask about her plans. Miss Dengel had the youth and strength and courage. Dr. MacLaren, racing against death, poured out in letters her hopes and dreams, for she was a practical woman always, the ground that had already been broken. Resolutely, she set about accomplishing her part of the plan, of becoming a sister doctor who would make the work permanent. Tired and ill, Dr. MacLaren thanked God for the joy of knowing that the work would not die with her. She planned a meeting with the young girl from Austria who was to make her dream come true, but the meeting never took place, for on April 17th, 1913, Agnes MacLaren died. One never knows how much of any work can be credited to the labors of any one person. Many personalities acting upon a project give it the impetus of their particular gifts. But both the medical mission sisters who carry out their great work in India and the Dominican order of which she was so proudly a member can well afford to thank God for the work that Agnes MacLaren accomplished, even though she herself never had the joy of seeing how abundantly her plan was to bear fruit in the years since her death. Now, this book was published in 1961. In my last video I said it was in the 50s, but I didn't look at the actual date on it. And once again, I just want to thank Seller559, and I want to repeat this line: one never knows how much of any work can be credited to the labors of any one person. Many personalities acting upon a project give it the impetus of their particular gifts. And I feel like I've known you forever on YouTube now. I think we're kind of trying to accomplish the same goals. And there's others out there too that I see that follow this channel, that channels that are a lot bigger than me. We're trying, we're doing what we can. And I think that it's just important to remember that you don't know how much you affect me. And I hope that I affect others in a similar way. This is a Catholic Northman. Talk to you again.